So today we're talking about this 2008 film, is Pontypool. It's directed by Bruce McDonald. He's actually a legendary Canadian director. We learned about him in school. Pontypool is the only film that I have seen from him, but he is a legendary Canadian director, born in 1959. He has a lot of Canadian films, maybe not very worldwide recognized, but his most recognized one is arguably the film that I just watched, Pontypool, which is, I don't want to say too much because I feel like there's a lot revealed throughout this film that's like very important and very like fulfilling when you realize everything. So first, spoiler free. It's a zombie movie, but it's a very, very unique twist on a zombie movie. So as it says in the synopsis here, there's a disc jockey, Grant Mazzy. He has his own radio show. It's like Mazzy in the morning. And, he's going about his day. The entire film pretty much takes place in this radio station. So, yes, Grant Mazzy, with his radio show, he's going about his day, and he goes into the radio station. He's listening to things on the radio, or he's going to the radio station. He's listening to the radio while going into the radio station. And as he's going to the radio station, this is 5 minutes of the movie, not really a spoiler. A woman is just like randomly on the side of the road, and it's like morning, like before it's even light. And it's snowing out. It's real cold. And she like taps on his window and she's just saying like gibberish. And he's like, what's going on here? And then he drives into the radio station. And he's like, okay, that was a weird experience. Okay, weird. I bet his radio show was to die for. Well, Shut Up or Die sounds like something an edgy fifth grader would say. Probably. That's probably the inspiration for this film. But no, so he goes to the radio station. He goes about his day at the radio station. And then, because the entire film is pretty much set place in that radio station, besides that first scene at the very beginning where he's driving in, they're kind of learning about this zombie apocalypse that is happening, specifically in their town of Pontypool, just from, they have a guy in the field. His name's Ken. He's the weather report man. They hear accounts from him. They have people calling in. One point, the BBC calls them, and they're like, we're just a small town in Ontario. Why is the BBC calling us about something happening? Military? What's going on? So it's very cool to see, everything being revealed, but just from the point of view of being at a radio station. He is just Ken in the field. It's a zombie movie where things are revealed very slowly. There's not too much violence going on, but eventually the zombies, they do make their way into the radio station, And so the radio station is a very apt place to set this film because it's a place where you're literally broadcasting your voice. The virus has the unique ability of being transmitted through voice. And there's a lot more intricacies to that I'll go into in just a second. But before I actually try to think about the nitty-gritty, do a bit of an analysis, because I really do love these kind of movies where it's a very unique kind of sci-fi psychological concept that's trying to figure out how it actually works. But in general, I really did like the film. I think while watching it, there's a few moments where I'm I feel like they wouldn't act like this. They would be more scared that an apocalypse is happening. And I feel like sometimes they're a bit nonchalant and things just happen weirdly. The way they react to things are just a bit weird, maybe overreact to things that shouldn't have been overreacted to, but then are underreacting to the fact that it's literally an apocalypse. But I loved when the mystery starts happening. Just descent into apocalypse is I love that genre. That's why I like zombie movies so much. So them hearing you infects you. Yes. So I'll get into that in just a second, but I just wanted to say that, I do love descent into apocalypse movies, just zombie apocalypse movies. The story arc of a zombie apocalypse movie never gets old to me, just because I love them, figuring out where they can hide, rationing things, who can they trust, blah, 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 things like that. It's very formulaic, but I love it every single time. And also the fact that it's about a radio station and that we're hearing about the violence that's happening in the town rather than seeing it is pretty cool, because it goes along with the themes and you're kind of just picturing what's happening in your head instead of seeing it. And this was made on a low budget. And so, maybe if you try to show everything, that you might not be able to really, maybe it just wouldn't be done well or something like that. But the fact that they're describing everything and the horror of what's happening, and the voice acting was great. It was phenomenal. And so like when you hear somebody be like, "Oh God, he's like ripping him apart. Oh, I don't know what I'm watching." Blah blah. It's pretty great actually. And like them being like, "Oh, this is like literally like down the block for me." That like it does still build the tension. Because there's a classic thing when you're making a film, they always say show don't tell. But this is kind of the opposite because again, a lot of the themes of the movie are around speech and like understanding what other people are saying. And so I think it works well for this film. You got to there's always ways you can break the rules and it still worked. The concept sounds like a college film or analog horror. It kind of does. And I kind of like that because this is the kind of like college film that I feel like I would have liked to make. And I like these kind of movies a lot. I like my favorite genre, I like to say, is like cool concept. Like Christopher Nolan is like the master of that. His concepts are like very, again, like you said, maybe college film, just something you're like so far-fetched. Like Tenet, it's like time going backwards and forwards at the same time. But then he just like has massive budgets and just like can pull it off. And I love, love, love it. But yes, okay, going into more spoilery spoilers and like actually figuring out what it means and why this is happening. So basically, starting out, it's like the zombies, they come in maybe halfway through the film. We get the build up. We have a lot of things at the beginning. The very first scene is actually just like it shows a radio wave and him on the air. And all he's saying is he's honestly saying a lot of gibberish while the opening credits are happening. He's saying things like, "Oh, there's this bridge, and in French, bridge is pont, and then there's a river and a lake, and then he's like doing this translating thing and making weird loose connections, and he ends up Pontypool, Pont du Lac, Pontypool," and he's just like repeating things, and it's gibberish, and it doesn't make any sense at the beginning, but if you watch the whole film, it does make sense in the end. Because okay, it starts it off with that, makes you really, really confused, and then it goes into the normal stuff. He's normal day, going to work, blah blah. Zombies start happening about halfway through the movie. Okay, so zombies start happening, and then they're starting to figure out why it's happening. Okay, there's this big thing going around in this town. What's happening? He's like, okay, maybe I don't believe this actually. I'm gonna go outside, try to figure out what the heck is happening. Are people like pranking me, calling in, and just like everybody's collectively being like, hey, there's a zombie invasion happening. And so he goes outside, and then they go outside, and there's a bunch of people there. They hear their voices. They lock themselves back inside, and then they hear the zombies outside repeating everything that they just said. Somebody yelled like, get inside, and then all the zombies are outside, keep on saying, get inside, get inside, get inside. It's very creepy. I really, really dug it. So again, they're still learning what's happening. And so we come to learn, because randomly, okay, this part I thought was a bit random. A doctor randomly crawls through a broken window into the radio station and becomes like a part of their gang. So the calls that he was getting, they were like, oh, there's this massive horde at this doctor's office. What's happening? Why are they all gathering here? They're like piling up mountains. People are like ripping each other apart. Why at this doctor's office? And then that doctor is at the radio station. I was like, I don't know why this is happening. Zombies want the best for you. Exactly. You just say something nice and they'll echo it back to you. It's like, you're beautiful. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. No, you. But then if you're like trying to be mean to yourself, you could also just self-degrading zombies. But alas. So yeah, the doctor shows up and he does a lot of expositional explaining. He's like, oh yes, so it's an auditory disease, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to figure out what happened, blah, blah, blah. It's like the English language is what is infecting people. And we shouldn't be talking. That's what he says. That's kind of like why this is here. Shut up or die. He says and reveals to everybody, the English language is what is infecting people. We need to stop talking. And so then they start like writing on pieces of paper instead of like actually talking to each other. They're hiding in like the radio booth. And so this point, I loved it so far. Even though the doctor come in was a bit random, I really, really loved what was happening. They confirmed that the zombies were an actual thing. English language. Okay, how does this work? How do the intricacies work? That's kind of what I wanted explained in that moment. And so from what we learned in that middle part, because one of their colleagues started to turn into a zombie, and we also really want to know as an audience, like what turns people into zombies? Why is it not everybody? We learned that, so when somebody's infected, they start repeating words just randomly. They got a call from Ken in the field, and he's like, they're just all repeating words like this transport truck, something like that. It's like, why is that a thing? And then so it seems like whenever they hear something, they just randomly start repeating it. Okay, weird. The doctor, he comes in, he says that when they turn, it's a gradual process. He says, and I quote, he said, "She's hunting us, but she doesn't know that yet." So it almost seems like there's like some other part of their brain that is erasing the existing part of the brain, and it's slowly coming to the forefront because they want to start hunting people. I don't know why, really. I don't know. We don't know why they're hunting people. But again, yeah, there were accounts of people like ripping people apart. They're attracted to sound. So when they hear voices, they go to that and just start hunting those people. I don't know why. They just need to hunt people. That's just what the virus is. Yeah, it seems gradual. And so one argument was that when they're turning into the zombies, there's a few moments. There's like the one girl at the radio station who they work with. She starts to turn into a zombie. They talk to her for a moment and she looks kind of scared. She just like starts repeating herself. She just starts like keep on talking, and she like maybe there's one thing that she latched onto, just an idea, and she just starts repeating it. Maybe she was like looking at a dial, and she's like, "Dial, I need to switch the dial, switch," and it's kind of like they're just repeating something that they're just like hyper focused on, a word, a concept, and they just keep repeating it, and it's weird and it makes no sense, but it's kind of creepy and it really works. Again, yeah, like the performances of them going into madness are great. I really like the few people that you see on screen do that. So as we're learning this, the key that it seems to be, what am I saying? It seems to be that there are certain like trigger words or key words, because as they're getting a call from somebody, don't know who, just somebody be like, "Ah, yeah, things are going crazy, man." Their phone call gets interrupted by a French broadcast, and it talks in French, and it says like, and then they translate it live on air. So they're on the radio, they're getting a call, then they translate it, and then he translates it, and it says, "Please avoid using the English language, avoid using terms of endearment such as honey or things like that. And also, do not translate this message." I think that was a phenomenal twist, a phenomenal like just like jaw drop moment. It was like, don't translate this message. This could be part of the virus, because it was sent in French. And then they're all like, "Oh, oops," because they're still broadcasting on air. They think it's their duty to like tell everybody what's happening, try to tell the events as they are, even though they're getting so many calls, and they're even saying live on air, it's like, we don't really know what's happening, but like this is an account that we got, so we're rolling with it. And also those themes of like just like rolling with a story even though you don't have all the facts is a very big part of the themes of the film as well. But we'll get there. There's a lot to go on with this movie. I really like dissecting this movie. It was a lot of fun. Okay, so where was I? We were at people turning into zombies, certain trigger words. Okay. English language, bad. So at this point in the movie, there's zombies outside. One of the girls inside, she's infected. She's like banging on the glass, kind of like here. I don't think this is an actual, that's not her in this moment, but it's similar to this. She's like, they're in the radio booth. She's banging on the glass. She's like slamming her head against it. She's all bloody. And then eventually at one point she starts shaking and she just like coughs up a bunch of blood. And then it just like goes crazy. And then she just like dies pretty much. And they're like, "Oh, I've never seen that." The doctor's like, "I've never seen this happen before." It's like, okay, cool. Wow. This is part of the variation of the zombie genre. What are they hiding out? I've never seen one in a radio station. Yeah, I know. I do love just like the cool twists on the zombie genre. One, the one location, love that. Radio station, very cool. You can have an outlet for your voice, but also the fact, the talking is the virus. I love that as well. It's just like two cool concepts there. Dawn of the Dead in a shopping mall. Exactly. I need to watch Dawn of the Dead. I really do want to watch Dawn of the Dead like this week, the original one. Maybe even both. But, so yeah, at this point in the movie, you're kind of thinking, okay, why hasn't everybody been infected? There's certain trigger words. Okay, maybe. They're still talking a bit, so you're like, kind of like, okay, what is happening? Is this kind of risky? Yeah, it's cool when they use it as a plot device instead of just something to ground it. I agree. It's like, if you're in just like, oh, they're hiding out in a basement just for the sake of it being a basement. But the fact that it's a radio station and they really use that as a part of the themes. Because, I mean, like an auditory virus, very clearly makes sense to be in a radio station. There's a lot going on there thematically and just like that you can use as a plot device. And so at this point in the movie, They're hiding out in the radio station. There's like the BBC's calling in. They're like, "What's happening?" And then they're like, "We don't know, man." And then the BBC's like, "Oh, okay, cool." Um, and so they're hiding out there. Got the doctor there, and the doctor starts to seem like he's speaking nonsense. And they're like, "Oh God, the doctor's now infected." But then he starts speaking in his native language. I think it was Armenian. And he just starts rambling on in Armenian, just going crazy. And they're like, "Oh, okay, he's not attacking us, but okay, let's go. We might have to kill this guy. I don't know." They killed like a little kid earlier on. I didn't mention that as well because they were attacking them. It was warranted. It was a zombie pretty much. But they're like, "Okay, we might have to kill the doctor here." But then he keeps talking in Armenian, but then they still talk to him a bit later, and he seems a little better. So because he changed languages when he was talking to himself, it like helped him a little. I feel like it's hard to describe this for somebody who hasn't seen the entire movie and thought about it a bit, but because the English language is the thing that's causing the virus, and it's a gradual virus, it's not like right away. The fact that he switched languages and started blabbering on in Armenian, he's able to think in Armenian. He has a bilingualness to be able to think in another language. It's kind of saving him. So the people who were only monolingual and could only speak English are pretty much doomed because they're not physically able to switch their brain to be thinking in another language. So the virus is always going to be existing there because they can only understand English. Does that make sense? I don't know. Transitioning also into like just thinking about why the zombies start repeating things. They also talked a lot in the movie about how when you repeat something over and over, it starts to lose its meaning. It's something that everybody's done, right? You repeat a word, and then it sounds just like complete gibberish after you repeat it for a bit. So they mentioned that in the film. And so if the zombies are continuing to repeat things, and they're repeating the same words over and over, it's almost like they're trying to make it sound like gibberish and not understanding it anymore. And so that makes them less of a zombie. It's kind of like a defense mechanism. Or the other argument is they're repeating things because they want to infect other people. I feel like that's also another theory, another argument. The reason why I think that them repeating something is a coping mechanism because they're trying to make that word lose meaning. Because the entire last act of the film, which honestly when I was watching it, I wasn't like too hot about it because Mazzy, the main guy, he thinks he's like figured something out. They're talking with this doctor and they're like, "Okay, how do you really understand a language? Why is it only English? Blah, blah, blah." And then his theory is like, you have to try to not understand. And he's like, "Yeah, I have to say this on the radio. I have to tell people, try to not understand things." And so he just like starts repeating on the radio. He's like saying a word. He says like, "Door is map." He just literally starts spouting gibberish. And the big one that he starts talking to about his producer, he's like, "The producer, she's starting to turn." And then she keeps on saying like, "Kill, kill, kill, kill." And then he says to her, "Kill is kiss." No, listen to me. Kill is kiss. They're trying to redefine the word kill. They keep repeating that. And then they kiss. And it's kind of weird. But the fact that they're trying to redefine the definition of a word, maybe because it sounds like it, or maybe because the meaning of kill and kiss are so opposite. I don't know. But then it kind of saves her. And so his cure for everything is trying to make people not understand the English language. It's a bit weird. It's a bit of a broad concept. And in the moment, I was like, this is stupid. Like, he can just go on the radio and say this. It's going to save everybody? What's happening? They're kissing now? Why are they kissing? But thinking about it more, and like the concept of trying to not understand something, I think is very cool. The end, honestly, it's the kind of movie that I really like. I do like the movies that have like kind of weird, surreal endings that kind of make you think about them along with the cool concepts. So I think this movie is like very much my kind of movie. A few things I want to say about this film before I wrap up this film talk. Like, there's a lot to think about this film in terms of like just language, which is very cool, and why I think it's a unique zombie movie. Because again, it uses the zombies as a device to talk about language, specifically the English language, and using that as a virus. Because, actually, Grant Mazzy, at the beginning of the film, he goes on this big rant before anything weird goes on. He says to the producer, he says something to the idea of he wants to make his radio show entertaining. Even if they don't have all the facts, he wants to make it entertaining, engaging. He wants to piss people off. He says that specifically. He says, you piss off one person, that's how you build a loyal fan base. Because they'll tell their friend, who then in turn will also get pissed off and start listening, and then that'll spread and build you a loyal fan base. He says that like very closely to what I just said. Kind of sounds like a virus, doesn't it? And so also, I think this movie is quite relevant nowadays, because now we're figuring out that the metaphor of language as a virus is talking about like people's ideologies and how news, not only like on TV, mainstream news, and specifically now online, people running with fake news, maybe they don't have all the facts. It's all about getting clicks, getting eyes, getting engagement, instead of telling the real truth. And so, this is all linking together, if anybody's been following. This is all linking together when we're thinking that if somebody, a news station, is telling a story, not having all the facts, and somebody is taking this as truth, somebody is understanding it, then it's locked in their brain and it's understood as a truth. But that's wrong. And so they need to try to not understand it. And the cure in this film is him trying to redefine the English language and not understand what was once understood as a truth. I think I understand it, which is kind of funny because it's like, it's very complex and it's encouraging you not to understand things 100%, but like in a good. So this is the part where the movie turns out to be a meta-criticism of its own medium. Yes, not just its own medium, but like just like news in general and just like discourse of talking. Yeah. And so that is why I respect this not just as like a zombie movie, but because it has more to say. It's always cool when you can unpack the package that seems like just this zombie movie on the surface, and then it actually just like has this other weird meaning that you could just like completely don't understand. Those are like the type of films where I'm just like, yes, please give me more. I love this. And especially because it's a genre film, horror film or sci-fi film doing that. I love when that happens. And so I'm very, very happy with like thinking about this movie afterwards and how it was constructed. And so not only about this, like, words as a virus metaphor, talking about fake news, gossip, power of words in general. It's like, yeah, Grant, he spells it out at the beginning to the chagrin of his producer. She's just like, come on, man, just tell the facts. We don't have all the facts, don't say everything. And the whole time in the movie, he's like, he wants to inform people. He wants to keep people up to date, but they really don't have all of the information. He thinks people might even be pulling his leg. He doesn't even know this the whole time. And so we can think that his voice is like the voice of Pontypool, the voice of the town. And he is the one who is like shaping the ideology of this town. His voice, the things that he says, his opinions are being projected onto the town. And it's almost like his voice is the virus. Pff, so many mind-blowing moments. I'm actually very happy with how much I've dissected this. But that leaning back more into the plot of the film rather than the actual psychology think piece of this entire film. Thinking about where the actual plague started. The two theories, I think. One, it could all just be in his head. It's in pretty much one location. He's in pretty much every single scene. This is just him kind of personifying his rant at the beginning where he's like, you have to build a loyal fan base, piss off one people, And so the zombies could just represent the pissed off people coming knocking at the radio station, regurgitating every single word that he says as just loyal followers, zombie followers would do of any online person, any news outlet or anything. You know, they're just regurgitating the same information, the same talking points. So it could all be in his head, which I think is a very, very apt way of summarizing the film as a zombie film. But also, just thinking about it more about the plot, there were hints that were dropped. The French broadcast says, avoid words of affection. And one of the very first stories that they break is that a cat named Honey has gone missing. And also, the producer, she often says and just calls people Honey. And so the very first story, he goes on, he talks about Honey the cat is missing. That could have started the plague, the word honey, in his speech about this cat that's gone missing. There's like, we also see posters around town of Honey the cat going missing. It's everywhere. This also makes a lot of sense because the one girl, Georgina Riley's character, what's her name again? Laurel Ann Drummond. Laurel Ann, who turns in the radio station. They're having dead air. They didn't know what to say. Things were going down. You know, zombies coming to the radio station. They're like, okay, put a previous tape on the radio. And she decides to put the one about Honey the missing cat. And she listens to it over and over while trying to put this on the air. And so she's constantly being berated with like the trigger word, honey. Maybe it's one word, maybe it's multiple words, who knows? But it makes sense why that town specifically would be infected, because that word honey had been said so many times. And he was the one who started the infection because he was on the radio saying it to everybody. It makes a lot of sense. It tracks. The word honey was said a lot of times in the film. It's very true. Okay. Oh, man. There's like a lot of talking points for this, and I kind of really dig it. Also, thinking about more back to another broad concept that doesn't make any sense in people's brains or mine. Like, it talks a lot about language, this film. And just like thinking about it, specifically, it's talking about the English language. And, you know, people who are monolingual, only know English, were more susceptible. We saw that at parts of the movie, the doctor started speaking in Armenian. The two protagonists started speaking in French. Very clearly that English was that language. Because the way language works, if you try to directly translate something to another language, it's never going to be 100% the same meaning. The meaning is going to be different. You can never have a 100% accurate translation just because the words are different. Just like the subtle associations to the word could be a little different. And so it gets you thinking, like, how did language start? It's just like incoherent mouth sounds we're attaching meaning to. So I think the two key concepts here are language and attaching meaning, because we're talking about, you know, like trying to not understand something, blah, blah, blah. So also, I was reading like comments and I watched a couple of videos on this film, and they were linking it to like diseases like Alzheimer's, aphasia. I luckily do not really know anybody with either of those, but there were people making comments saying how some of the zombie behavior in the film kind of reminded them of somebody that they knew who maybe had one of these diseases. People uttering things, people saying kind of like nonsense, people repeating things, trying to understand something, but just can't quite understand the concept of what's happening. And that was kind of more scary to them than the actual zombie film. So that was very interesting as well. I feel like a few other things that I want to say. I think that, again, the ending of not understanding something is so interesting and hard to understand, pun intended, but in a good way. Because I feel like I love the idea of try not to understand something, because it makes me feel happy when I watch a film or I read something and I don't 100% get it. Maybe even like moments when you're reading and maybe like for a few paragraphs, you just like zoned out for a second. It's like you definitely were reading the words. Like the words were entering your brain one by one, but then you just snap out of it and you're like, oh, I just don't know. I read those words. I don't know what happened. Everyone has those moments. And also, yeah, again, watching a movie, not 100% understanding it, it could feel a little frustrating. But I feel like the try not to understand message of this film was kind of like pretty moving, because you don't need to understand something fully to still get something from it. You don't need to understand something fully to be moved by it. You can make your own connections. You can dissect it a lot, like I'm doing with this film, to try to get more meaning out of it. Or you could just take it as it is, as face value. You got what you got from it. Okay, that's fine. That's cool. Maybe that's like less relating it to language and the exact idea that it was putting forth, talking about not understanding specifically language, specifically concepts. But that's kind of what I took from it, and I kind of like that. So, I'm rolling with it. But I think that the reason why I like this film so much, there are a few tonally weird moments, but I think it's a very well done zombie movie first. Like, just one location, very fun, very tense, well done plot-wise. Also, the stuff that I've just talked about, just extrapolating on all that, very cool. And it's like also everyone can kind of relate to the psychology of it. I feel like everyone's walked in a room, they've forgotten why they walked in the room. Everyone's done this. Some people have experienced diseases, Alzheimer's, like dementia, aphasia. Sometimes you can't get a song out of your head. Sometimes you repeat a word and it loses meaning. Everybody's done that as a kid. Sometimes your mind just goes down a rabbit hole. I feel like I do that often, verbally, not just my mind. Sometimes things make sense, but don't make sense at the same time. You feel like you've gotten some meaning from it, but also you couldn't put it into words. Everyone's had those moments where it's like you understand this concept, you want to tell somebody else and share your passion for something, why you like. It's like showing somebody a video that you really like and then them not like receiving it the same. And you just can't put into words why it works for you so much. Everybody's done this. And so the psychology of this movie about trying not to understand something is very interesting to me because it's done in the verbal way near the end of the film and at the very beginning of the film where they're literally just uttering nonsense, trying not to understand the English language. The beginning of the film is just here. I think there's a review here that kind of has the first quote of the beginning of the film right here. So the beginning of the film is just, you see a sine wave. It's on a radio. And it's Mazzy, and he goes, "Miss Frenchie's cat is missing. The signs are posted all over town. Have you seen Honey? We've all seen the posters, but nobody has seen Honey, the cat. Nobody. Until last Thursday morning when Miss Colette Piscine swerved her car to miss Honey while she drove across this bridge. Well, this bridge, now slightly damaged, is a bit of a local treasure and even has its own fancy name, Pont de Flac. Now, Colette, that sounds like Coulette. That's panty in French, and piscine means pool. Pontypool. Flac also means pool in French, so Colette Piscine, in French, Pontypool, drives across the Pont du Flac, or Pont de Pool, if you will, to avoid hitting Miss French's cat that's been missing in Pontypool. Pontypool. Pont de Pool. Pontypool. Pont de Flac. What does it mean? Well, Norman Mailer, he had an interesting theory that he used to explain the strange coincidences in the aftermath of the JFK assassination. In the wake of huge events, after them and before them, physical details, they spasm for a moment, they sort of unlock. And when they come back into focus, they suddenly concede, in a weird way, street names and birth dates and middle names, all kinds of superfluous things that appear related to each other. It's a ripple effect. So what does this mean? Well, it means something's going to happen, something big, but then something's always about to happen. This is like the first radio broadcast of the film, and we're seeing just the sine waves and this voice being said to us. And so after everything that I've just discussed, after learning about what the film is, and this like thought rabbit hole that this entire block of text is going down, starting to not make sense. People making less connections. People just making random connections. Just going literally with what their brain is thinking in that moment. It's pretty cool. It's a bit out there. The film is a bit out there, but I like thinking about it. I thought it was fun. I liked the film. I liked the movie.